My name is Fatima Al-Rashid, and I am 90 years old. And I am the woman who went viral for being baptized after living my entire life behind the walls of a Saudi palace. The water closed over me. And when I came up, I was weeping. 90 years of silence broke open at that moment. 90 years of secrets. 90 years of searching in the dark for something I was forbidden to name. I never imagined I would be here, saying these words, not after everything I have hidden, everything I have risked, everything I was taught to fear. For almost a century, my life has been a performance. I was the devout mother of a Saudi prince. I attended prayers 5 times a day. I made pilgrimages. I quoted scripture. I wore my faith like a garment for the world to see. But inside, I was hollow. Inside, I was dying of thirst in a desert of rules and rituals that never satisfied the ache in my soul. And I was afraid. Afraid of being discovered. Afraid of being cast out. Afraid that if I spoke the truth, I would lose everything, my family, my home, my identity, perhaps even my life. But I was wrong. I was so terribly, completely, devastatingly wrong. A few weeks ago, at 90 years old, I was baptized in the name of Jesus Christ. I went under that water as a woman who had spent decades hiding her doubts, her questions, her desperate secret search for truth. And I came up weeping, broken, and finally free. I do not deserve to be telling you this story. I do not deserve the mercy that has been shown to me. And that is exactly why I have to tell it, because if Jesus can reach a woman like me, hidden behind palace walls, trapped by tradition and fear, then he can reach anyone, anywhere, no matter how impossible it seems. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in Riyadh in the 1940s, in a house where God's name was spoken often but his love was never felt. My father was a religious scholar, a man who knew the scriptures better than he knew his own children. And in that house, faith was not a gift. It was a burden. It was rules and correction and the constant fear of falling short. The city itself felt like an extension of our home. Dust hung in the air, thick and golden in the afternoon heat. The streets were narrow, shadowed, divided, men on one side, women on the other. 5 times a day, the call to prayer echoed through those streets, bouncing off clay walls and wooden shutters. It was beautiful, haunting. But to me, it always sounded like a summons. Like I was being called to account for something I hadn't done right. Our house was small but orderly. Everything had its place. My father's books lined one wall, volumes of commentaries, legal texts, centuries-old manuscripts he handled with more tenderness than he ever showed us. My mother moved through the rooms like a shadow. Silent. Submissive. Exhausted. I never once heard her laugh. I'm not sure she remembered how. She obeyed my father without question. And I learned to do the same. By the time I was 6, I was memorizing verses I didn't understand. My father would sit me down after dawn prayers, a long wooden stick resting across his lap, not to hit me, but to remind me it was there. He would recite a passage, and I would repeat it back. Again. And again. And again. Until the words were burned into my memory. I learned to recite before I learned to read. I learned to obey before I learned to ask why. Mistakes were not opportunities to learn. They were failures. Moral failures. If I stumbled over a word, my father's face would darken. You dishonor God with your carelessness, Fatima. If I asked a question, why do we do this? What does this mean? He would silence me with a sharp look. Questions are the beginning of rebellion. You are a girl. It is not your place to question. It is your place to submit. So I stopped asking. I stopped wondering. I just obeyed. But there was one day I will never forget. I was 8 years old. My father had left one of his treasured texts open on the table, an ancient manuscript he'd been studying for weeks. I was curious. I wanted to see what made it so special. I leaned over it, trying to make out the elegant script. And as I did, my sleeve caught the edge of the page. It tore. Just a small tear. Maybe 2 inches. But the sound of it, like a whisper of betrayal, filled the entire room. My father appeared in the doorway. I don't know how he knew. Maybe he heard it. Maybe he just sensed it. But when he saw what I'd done, his face went pale. Then red. He didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, he knelt down in front of me, gripped my shoulders, and spoke in a voice so cold it made me want to disappear. God sees everything, Fatima. Every disrespect. Every failure. Do you understand? He is watching you right now. And he does not forget. I couldn't stop shaking. I nodded, tears streaming down my face, but he didn't let go. You have brought shame into this house. And when you stand before God one day, He will remember this moment. He will remember what you did. From that day on, I prayed differently. Not with hope. Not with love. But with fear. I prayed because I was terrified of what would happen if I didn't. I prayed because I believed God was keeping a record of every mistake, every careless thought, every torn page. I did everything I was told. I memorized. I fasted. I bowed. I obeyed. But I felt nothing. I wanted to feel what the clerics described in their sermons: peace, joy, divine love, the warmth of God's mercy wrapping around you like sunlight. But all I felt was the weight of impossible standards and the certainty that I would never, ever measure up. And deep down, in a place I didn't have words for yet, I began to wonder, what if this is all there is? What if God really is like my father, impossible to please, quick to condemn, and always, always watching for the next mistake? I didn't know it then, but that question would haunt me for the next 8 decades. When I was 12, I met someone who made me believe that maybe, just maybe, life could be more than fear and duty. Her name was Nura. She lived 3 houses down from ours, and she was everything I wasn't: bold, curious, full of laughter that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep inside her. She had bright eyes that sparkled when she talked about her dreams. She wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to travel. She wanted to read every book in the world. When we were together, I could breathe. She didn't care about my father's rules or the weight of expectations that pressed down on me every day. She just saw me. And for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I was more than just a list of things I was doing wrong. We would sit together in the courtyard between our houses, hidden from view, whispering about the futures we imagined. She would tell me stories. I would listen and, for those brief moments, forget that the world was watching, that God was keeping score, that one mistake could unravel everything. Nura was the only light in my rigid, suffocating childhood. And then she got sick. It started with a cough. Just a small thing at first, something we both laughed off. But it didn't go away. It got worse. Deeper. Harsher. Within weeks, she was too weak to come outside. Within a month, I was visiting her in her room, watching her body shrink beneath the blankets. Tuberculosis, the doctor said. There was nothing they could do. I didn't accept that. I couldn't. I prayed like I had never prayed before. Not out of duty this time, but out of desperation. I woke before dawn and stayed on my knees until my father called me for breakfast. I fasted until I felt dizzy. I made promises to God, wild, impossible promises. If you are merciful, let her live. Please. I will do anything. I will be perfect. I will never complain. I will memorize every verse you want me to know. Just don't take her. Please don't take her. I thought if I prayed hard enough, if I was good enough, if I proved myself worthy enough, God would listen. The clerics always said God answered prayers. They said He was merciful. They said He cared for His children. So I prayed. And I waited. And I believe. But Nura kept getting worse. I watched her body waste away. I watched her mother struggle to lift her when she needed to be moved. I watched the light in her eyes flicker and fade. And every day, I prayed harder. It was a bright morning in late spring when she died. The kind of morning that feels like a gift: warm sun, clear sky, a breeze that carries the scent of jasmine through the windows. I was holding her hand when it happened. One moment, she was breathing, shallow, labored, but still breathing. And then she wasn't. Just like that. She was gone. Her mother wailed. I sat there in silence, still holding her hand, unable to process what had just happened. I kept thinking, this isn't real. This can't be real. I prayed. I did everything right. God was supposed to answer. The funeral was quick. The grief was private, tucked away behind closed doors the way everything painful was in our world. People came to offer condolences, and they all said the same things. It was God's will. She is in a better place now. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask them how they could say these things with such certainty, such calmness, as if an 8-year-old girl dying was just part of some divine plan we were supposed to accept without question. But I didn't scream. I just nodded. I thanked them for coming. I played the part one was expected to play. And inside, something hardened. I didn't stop believing in God. That would come later. But I stopped believing He cared. I stopped believing He listened. I stopped believing that all the prayers and fasting and promises meant anything at all. If this was mercy, I wanted no part of it. From that day forward, I went through the motions. I prayed 5 times a day because I had to. I fasted because it was expected. I memorized verses because my father demanded it. But I felt nothing. No hope. No expectation. No connection. Faith became a hollow routine. A performance. A box to check. And deep in my heart, in a place I didn't dare speak aloud, I carried a question that would follow me for the next 78 years. What kind of God takes away the only light in a little girl's life and calls it His will? I had no answer. And for most of my life, I stopped looking for one. At 16, I was married to a man I had met twice. His name was Khalid al-Rashid. He was 34 years old, a rising official in the royal court with powerful connections and an impeccable reputation. My father arranged it. My mother prepared me. And I had no say in the matter. There was no courtship. No conversation about what I wanted or who I dreamed of becoming. Just a contract, a ceremony, and a new last name that carried more weight than my own voice ever would. On my wedding night, I remember standing in a room filled with silk and gold, wearing a dress that cost more than my father earned in a year, and feeling absolutely nothing. No excitement. No hope. Just the dull certainty that my life was no longer mine. Khalid was not cruel in the way my father had been. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His control was quieter, more absolute. He expected obedience, and he got it. My role was simple: be beautiful, be silent, be respectable. Reflect well on him. Manage the household. Produce heirs. My opinions? Irrelevant. My dreams? Not considered. My voice? Unwelcome. I learned quickly that the best way to survive in that marriage was to become invisible. To anticipate his needs before he stated them. To agree before he had to insist. To fade into the background of his life like expensive furniture, necessary, but not meant to be noticed. He spoke to me the way one might speak to a servant. Polite, distant, transactional. We shared a home, a name, a bed. But we never shared a life. And the loneliness was suffocating. But then, when I was 19, everything shifted. I gave birth to my son. They placed him in my arms, this tiny, perfect child, and for the first time since Nura died, I felt something crack open inside me. Love. Pure, overwhelming, desperate love. I named him Faisal. And I poured everything I had into him. I was determined that his childhood would be different from mine. I spoke to him softly. I answered his questions. I let him laugh without fear of correction. When he made mistakes, I held him instead of scolding him. I told him he was loved, not because of what he did, but because of who he was. He became my purpose. My reason to wake up. The one part of my life that felt like it mattered. But even he didn't know the truth about me. Because publicly, I was everything I was supposed to be. The perfect royal wife. Poised at state functions. Gracious to guests. Impeccably dressed. I attended prayers. I hosted gatherings. I performed my religious duties without fail, fasting, pilgrimage, charity. I wore my faith like the jewelry I draped around my neck, expensive, visible, and completely hollow. No one suspected that inside, I was drowning. Late at night, when the palace was quiet and Khalid was asleep, I would lie awake and feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. The rules. The rituals. The endless performance. I would stare at the ceiling and wonder, is this all there is? Is this what my entire life will be, rules and rituals and silence? I wanted to feel something. Anything. I wanted the faith I performed so diligently to mean something beyond obligation. I wanted to pray and feel heard. I wanted to believe there was a God who saw me as more than a collection of duties and failures. But I felt nothing. Just emptiness. Just the echo of my own voice in a vast, indifferent silence. And the questions terrified me. Because in the kingdom, doubt is not a journey. It's betrayal. Questions are not signs of seeking. They're signs of rebellion. To admit that I felt nothing when I prayed, that the God I served felt distant and cold, that I was suffocating under the weight of a faith I couldn't feel, that would have been unthinkable. So I pushed it down. I locked it away. I told myself I was ungrateful, that I had everything a woman could want, a powerful husband, a beautiful son, wealth, status, respect. What right did I have to want more? And so the years passed. My son grew. My husband aged. The palace walls closed in tighter. I became an expert at silence, at suppression, at performing a life I didn't feel. But late at night, in the darkness, the questions remained. And no amount of prayer, no amount of fasting, no amount of perfect obedience could silence them. I was a woman trapped, not just by palace walls, but by a faith that demanded everything and gave me nothing in return. And I had no idea that the answer I was searching for was still decades away. Everything changed when I was 71. My son had been invited to a diplomatic summit in Paris, some high-level gathering of officials and dignitaries. He asked me to accompany him. At my age, I rarely traveled anymore, but he insisted. It will be good for you, mother. A change of scenery. I agreed. I packed my things. I said my prayers. And 3 days into the trip, my heart gave out. I don't remember much about the collapse itself, just a tightness in my chest that spread like fire, the floor rushing up to meet me, and then voices, urgent and overlapping, speaking a language I barely understood. When I woke, I was in a Paris hospital. Monitors beeped around me. 4 lines snaked from my arms. And standing at the foot of my bed, reviewing a chart, was a young woman in a white coat. She looked up and smiled. Madam Al-Rashid. Welcome back. Her name was Dr. Elise Moreau. She was maybe 35, with kind eyes and a calm efficiency that immediately put me at ease. And hanging from a delicate chain around her neck was a small silver cross. I noticed it immediately. In my world, that symbol meant something specific, Christian, Western, other. But I said nothing. I was too weak to care. Over the next few days, Elise checked on me regularly. And she was different. She didn't treat me like a title or a patient number. She spoke to me like I was a person. She asked about my life, not the sanitized version people expected, but the real questions. What brings you joy, madam? What are you afraid of? What do you hope for? No one had asked me those questions in decades. Maybe ever. I didn't know how to answer. So I deflected. I gave polite, vague responses. But she didn't push. She just listened. And something about the way she listened made me feel seen. One evening, after she'd finished checking my vitals, she paused at the door. Then she turned back. Madam Al-Rashid, may I ask you something? I nodded. Would it be all right if I prayed for you? I froze. I didn't know what to say. In my world, prayer was formal, scripted, a duty performed at specific times in specific ways. But the way she asked, it was so gentle. So personal. Not as your doctor, she added quickly. But as someone who believes God cares about you personally. If it makes you uncomfortable, I understand. But I would like to, if you'll allow it. I should have said no. I should have politely declined and changed the subject. But something in me, some desperate, hidden part, whispered yes. Let her. All right, I said quietly. She pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down. She didn't bow elaborately or recite memorized words. She just closed her eyes, folded her hands, and spoke as if she were talking to someone in the room. Lord Jesus, she said softly, hold her. Let her feel your presence. Let her know she is seen, she is loved, and she is not alone. That was it. Simple. Direct. Intimate. And in that moment, I felt something I had never felt in 71 years of prayer. Warmth. Not physical warmth, but something deeper, like a presence settling around me, holding me. Peace. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of something greater than fear. And for just a moment, I felt safe. My breath caught. Tears pricked my eyes. Elise opened her eyes and smiled gently. Thank you for letting me do that. I nodded, unable to speak. After she left, I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, not from the medical episode, but from what had just happened. I told myself it was nothing. The medication. The stress. Western influence clouding my judgment. It means nothing, I told myself firmly. Forget it. But I couldn't. When I returned to Riyadh, when I went back to my routines and my palace and my carefully controlled life, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. I couldn't stop remembering the way Elise had prayed, not to a distant, angry God who was keeping score, but to someone she called by name. Someone she spoke to like a friend. Like a father. Lord Jesus, hold her. The words echoed in my mind at the strangest times. During prayers. During sleepless nights. During the long, empty hours when I sat alone in my room. And slowly, quietly, a question began to take root, a question I was terrified to even acknowledge. What if there's more? What if I've been looking in the wrong place all along? What if the God I've been searching for isn't the God I've been serving? I didn't have answers. I didn't even know where to begin looking for them. But the seed had been planted. And whether I wanted it to or not, it had already begun to grow. For the next 15 years, I lived two lives. By day, I was Fatima al-Rashid, mother of a prince, pillar of the community, model of devotion. I attended prayers. I hosted gatherings. I fasted during Ramadan. I recited verses I'd known since childhood. To anyone watching, I was exactly what I had always been. But at night, when the palace fell silent and the staff retreated to their quarters, I became someone else entirely. A seeker. A doubter. A woman desperate for answers. It started small. A few searches on my tablet, innocent at first. Christian prayer. What Christians believe about God. I told myself I was just curious. Just trying to understand what Elise had meant when she prayed that night in Paris. But curiosity became obsession. I discovered testimonies, videos of people from all over the world talking about their encounters with Jesus. Former Muslims. Former atheists. People who had been searching, just like me. I would watch them late into the night, the tablet balanced on my lap, earbuds stuck carefully into my ears, the volume turned so low I had to strain to hear. I downloaded a Bible into an encrypted folder on my device. I read it in pieces, a chapter here, a few verses there, terrified that someone would walk in and see what was on my screen. Every morning, I cleared my browser history. Every morning, I deleted downloaded files. Every morning, I made sure there was no trace of what I'd been doing the night before. I wrote down verses that struck me, words that felt like water in a desert, and hid them on tiny scraps of paper in the back of my jewelry box, tucked behind necklaces I never wore. I installed a VPN to cover my digital tracks. I became an expert in secrecy. And I told no one. Not my attendants. Not my physician. Not even my son. Because what I was discovering was dangerous. Forbidden. In my world, this kind of searching wasn't just frowned upon, it was betrayal. The teachings of Jesus shocked me. Forgiveness without condition. Love without earning it first. Grace, freely given, not purchased through perfect obedience. It contradicted everything I had been taught about how to relate to God. In the faith I grew up in, you earned God's favor. You proved yourself worthy. You obeyed, you performed, you measured up, or you faced judgment. But Jesus said things like, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He said, "I have not come to condemn the world, but to save it." He touched lepers. He forgave adulterers. He ate with sinners. He welcomed the broken, the outcast, the ones who had nothing to offer. And something in me, something deep and starving, reached for that message like a drowning person reaches for air. But another part of me resisted. This was dangerous. This was Western propaganda. This was a slippery slope that could cost me everything, my family, my reputation, my home, maybe even my life. "What are you doing, Fatima?" I would ask myself in the dark. "You're 75 years old. You're too old to be questioning everything. Stop this before it destroys you." But I couldn't stop. There were close calls. Moments when my heart nearly stopped because I thought I'd been caught. Once, a servant walked into my room while I was watching a testimony. I barely had time to close the screen and pretend I was reading the news. She gave me a strange look but said nothing. Another time, my son asked why I was staying up so late. "You look exhausted, mother. What are you doing at night?" "Praying," I lied. It wasn't entirely untrue. I was praying, just not the way he thought. And then there was the tech advisor who came to update my tablet. He frowned at something on the screen, probably my VPN, and asked if I was having connectivity issues. I smiled and said I didn't know, that technology confused me. He didn't press further. But my hands shook for an hour after he left. The isolation was crushing. These were the loneliest years of my life. I was carrying a secret so large, so heavy, that it felt like it would break me. I couldn't share it with anyone. Couldn't test my thoughts out loud. Couldn't ask for help or guidance or reassurance. I was utterly, completely alone. And yet, despite the fear, despite the danger, despite the isolation, I couldn't stop. Because the more I learned about Jesus, the more something in me came alive. The message called to the parts of my soul that had been hungry since Nura died. Since my father first told me God was watching every failure. Since my husband made me invisible. Since I spent decades performing a faith I couldn't feel. For the first time in my life, I was reading about a God who didn't demand perfection before he loved you. A God who pursued the lost. A God who said, "I came for the broken, not the righteous." And slowly, terrifyingly, beautifully, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had come for me, too. At 89, my body finally gave up. It happened gradually at first, fatigue that wouldn't lift, breathlessness that came without exertion, a heaviness in my chest that felt like something was pressing down on me from the inside. Then it happened all at once. Heart complications. Respiratory weakness. A cascade of failures that left me unable to walk more than a few steps without collapsing. I was moved from hospital to hospital, Dubai first, then London, then Switzerland. Different doctors. Different diagnoses. Different medications that made me feel worse instead of better. The rooms blurred together. White walls. Beeping machines. The antiseptic smell that clings to everything in a hospital. My son came when he could. I could see the worry in his eyes, the helplessness. He held my hand and told me I would be fine, but we both knew he was lying. I was 89 years old. My body was shutting down. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. For the first time in my life, death was not an abstract concept. It was immediate. Real. Close enough to feel its breath on my neck. And I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of the emptiness I feared waited after death. All those years of prayers, of rituals, of performing a faith I couldn't feel, what if it had all been for nothing? What if I died and there was just silence? Darkness? Nothingness? Or worse, what if I had been wrong all along, and the God I would meet was the one I'd spent my childhood fearing? The one keeping score, tallying failures, ready to condemn? The weeks blurred together. Procedures I barely understood. Medications that dulled the pain but clouded my mind. Doctors speaking in low voices outside my door. Nurses checking monitors, adjusting 4 lines, offering kind smiles that didn't reach their eyes. And at night, alone in those sterile rooms, the questions I had suppressed for years became deafening. What if I die without knowing the truth? What if I spent 90 years searching for God and never found Him? What if everything I've read, everything I've hoped for, everything I've been too afraid to believe, what if it was all just wishful thinking? I had spent 15 years secretly searching. 15 years reading about a God who loved without condition, who forgave without earning, who pursued the lost and the broken. But I had never fully surrendered to it. I had never let myself fully believe it. Because belief required trust. And trust required vulnerability. And I had spent my entire life protecting myself from vulnerability. But now, lying in a hospital bed in Switzerland, my body failing, my time running out, I had nothing left to protect. Nothing left to lose. One night, alone in the darkness, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor beside my bed, I finally broke. I didn't recite memorized prayers. I didn't try to find the right words or the proper posture. I just spoke into the silence, my voice barely a whisper, tears streaming down my face. God, if you are real, show me the truth before I die. My voice cracked. I cannot die like this. Uncertain. Empty. Alone. I have spent my whole life searching for you, and I still don't know if you hear me. I still don't know if you care. I still don't know if any of this matters. I covered my face with my hands, sobbing. I am tired. I am so tired of pretending. I am tired of performing. I am tired of being afraid. If you are there, if you have been there all along, please, please, show me. Let me know you before I die. Let me feel something real. Just once. Just once, let me know I am not alone. It was the most honest prayer I had ever prayed. No formality. No performance. No attempt to sound righteous or worthy. Just raw, desperate, broken honesty. I fell asleep with tears still wet on my face, my pillow damp, my heart empty but somehow lighter. I had finally said what I'd been too afraid to say for 89 years. I had finally admitted my doubt, my longing, my need. I did not expect an answer. I had prayed thousands of prayers in my life and felt nothing. I had begged for Nura to leave. I had begged to feel God's presence. I had begged for decades to know the truth. And I had only ever been met with silence. So I did not expect an answer that night either. But that night, everything changed. In the early morning hours, something happened that I cannot fully explain. I don't know if it was a dream. I don't know if it was a vision. I don't know if my mind was playing tricks on me or if what I experienced was as real as the bed beneath me. All I know is that it happened. And it changed everything. I found myself standing in a vast desert. The sand stretched endlessly in every direction, golden and shimmering in light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the landscape of my childhood, the land I grew up in, the heat I knew, the emptiness I had felt my entire life. But I was not alone. A man stood before me, dressed in white. I could not see his face clearly, it was too bright, too overwhelming, but I knew. I knew with a certainty that defied logic or reason. This was Jesus. My first instinct was fear. Bone-deep, paralyzing fear. I expected judgment. I expected accusation. I expected him to list every failure, every doubt, every night I had spent searching in secret, every prayer I had prayed without believing, every question I had been too afraid to ask out loud. I expected condemnation. But there was none. He looked at me, not with anger, not with disappointment, but with something I had never seen directed at me before. Tenderness. Compassion. Love. And then he spoke. Fatima. Just my name. But the way he said it, like he had been saying it my whole life, like he had known me before I was born, like every moment of my existence had mattered to him. You have searched your whole life for the love you never received. His voice was gentle, but it cut through every defense I had ever built. I am that love. And in that moment, everything broke open. Every memory I had buried came flooding out. Noura's death. My father's coldness. My husband's indifference. The decades of silence. The unanswered prayers. The hollow rituals. The secret searching. The loneliness. The fear. The desperate, aching need to be seen, to be known, to be loved for who I was and not for what I could perform. It all poured out of me, 89 years of pain and longing and confusion, and I couldn't hold it back. I fell to my knees in the sand, my hands covering my face, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. I'm sorry, I gasped. I'm so sorry. I doubted. I questioned. I didn't know how to find you. I didn't know if you cared. I didn't know. But he knelt down beside me. And he spoke again, his words cutting through my spiral of shame. I did not come to judge you. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt a warmth spread through me, not physical, but deeper. Like he was reaching into the places I had locked away, the places I had hidden even from myself. I came to find you. I looked up at him through my tears. And I understood. He had been pursuing me. All along. Even when I didn't know it. Even when I thought I was searching for him in secret, he was the one searching for me. Every testimony I watched. Every verse I read. Every moment I felt something stir in my heart, it wasn't me finding him. It was him finding me. All those years, I whispered. When I thought you didn't hear me. When I thought you didn't care. When Nura died and I hated you. When I went through the motions and felt nothing. You were there? I was always there, he said. Waiting. Pursuing. Loving you. Even when you couldn't feel it. Even when you didn't believe it. I never stopped. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just knelt there in the sand, weeping, as decades of pain and doubt and fear melted away. For the first time in 90 years, I felt truly seen. Not as the mother of a prince. Not as a woman who had failed to measure up. Not as someone who had to earn love through perfect obedience. But as Fatima. Just Fatima. Broken. Searching. Imperfect. And love. Completely, unconditionally, eternally love. I don't deserve this, I whispered. No one does, he said gently. That's why I call it grace. And then, before I could say anything else, the vision began to fade. The desert. The light. His presence. It all slipped away like water through my fingers. But the peace remained. I woke up in my hospital bed, my pillow soaked with tears, my body still weak, but my heart felt lighter than it had in decades. I looked around the sterile room, the beeping monitors, the 4 lines, the pale morning light filtering through the curtains, and I knew. I knew what I had to do. I knew what had been waiting for me all along. And I was finally ready. As soon as I was strong enough to walk without assistance, I called for my nurse. Her name was Anna, a Polish woman in her 50s who had been caring for me for the past 2 weeks. She was kind, competent, and I had noticed the small wooden cross she wore tucked beneath her uniform. Anna, I said, my voice still weak but steady. I need you to take me to a church. She froze, a medication tray balanced in her hands. I'm sorry, madam. Did you say a church? Yes. A church. A Christian church. As soon as possible. She set the tray down slowly, her eyes wide. Madam, are you sure? Perhaps you're still recovering and... I am certain, I said firmly. Please. I need to go. She asked again. And again. Each time, I gave her the same answer. Finally, she nodded, still looking uncertain, and helped me get dressed. We drove to a tiny chapel in a quiet European town whose name I can't even remember now. The building was old, stone, tucked away on a narrow street. When we stepped inside, there were only 8 people scattered across the wooden pews. I sat in the very back, my hands trembling in my lap, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out again. I watched the service, the singing, the prayers, the reading of scripture, and felt tears streaming down my face. This was real. I was really here. After 15 years of searching in secret, after a lifetime of silence and fear, I was finally in the place I had been too afraid to enter. After the service ended, I approached the pastor, a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes. Excuse me, I said quietly. May I speak with you? Privately? He nodded and led me to a small room behind the altar. Anna waited outside. And then, for the first time in my life, I told the whole truth. I told him about my childhood. About Nura. About the decades of hollow faith. About Elise in Paris. About the 15 years of secret searching. About the hospital. About the vision. About Jesus kneeling beside me in the desert, saying words I had waited my whole life to hear. I told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said gently, "And what do you want, madam?" I looked down at my hands, old hands, wrinkled and spotted with age. I want to follow him. But why would God want someone like me? After all these years? After all my doubts? The pastor opened his Bible and turned to a page marked with a ribbon. He read aloud. I have loved you with an everlasting love, I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. I couldn't stop the tears. They came in waves, decades of grief and longing finally released. I believe, I whispered. I believe. I want to follow Jesus. He smiled. Then let me ask you something. Would you like to be baptized? Yes, I said without hesitation. Yes. Please. They led me to a small pool behind the chapel, nothing grand, nothing elaborate. Just water and witnesses and the presence of God that felt so tangible I could barely breathe. The pastor helped me step in. My hands shook. I felt the weight of my entire life pressing down on me, 90 years of fear, performance, silence, searching. He placed his hand on my shoulder and asked gently, "Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that He died for your sins and rose again, and that He is Lord?" I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face, and said the words that changed my eternity. I do. I believe. Then it is my honor to baptize you, my sister, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He lowered me into the water. And when I came up, I was weeping, not from fear, not from grief, but from a joy so overwhelming I didn't have words for it. I was free. Someone in that tiny congregation recorded it on their phone. I didn't know at the time. They posted it online, and somehow, beyond anyone's expectations, it spread. Millions have seen it now. Millions have debated it. The reactions have been intense. Death threats arrive through intermediaries. Religious leaders condemn me publicly. My son has faced enormous pressure. Some say the video is fake. Some say it's Western propaganda. Some say I've been brainwashed. Some claim it's AI generated. And I understand. I truly do. Because I was once where they are, skeptical, defensive, convinced that what I believed was the only truth. But here's what I know now, after 90 years. For decades, I lived with fear. For decades, I lived with questions. For decades, I lived seeking a God I could not feel, performing rituals that left me empty, hiding my doubts because doubt was dangerous. But the moment I met Jesus, the moment I finally surrendered and let myself be found, I felt what I had been searching for my entire life. I felt seen. Not for my title or my performance, but for who I truly was. I felt forgiven. Not because I earned it, but because grace was freely given. I felt love. Not conditionally, not based on my obedience, but completely, unconditionally, eternally. My name is Fatima Al-Rashid. I am the mother of a Saudi prince. I lived a lifetime in silence, behind palace walls, behind rituals, behind fear. But today, I am silent no more. Jesus found me. And I am his. Forever.